Hey there, Jake here from CVP, and today I'm really excited to show you our first look at Canon's new cinema EOS camera. This is the C400, and honestly, I think this could be the camera a lot of people have been waiting for Canon to make, and considering what it can do, it's actually been priced very well. We've shot a lot with this camera and have quite a few things to talk about, so grab a drink, get comfy, and let's take a look at what the C400 can do. The camera we've been shooting with is a pre-production loan unit that Canon very kindly sent to us to test and create this video. But we've only had it for about 48 hours. So we are really looking forward to getting the camera back in for more shooting as soon as we can. But we have tried to cram as much into the time we had the camera as we possibly could. Even though Canon are lending us this camera, they have no input on this video whatsoever. We've managed to run the camera through all of our regular tests and shoot 4 different creative scenarios with the camera. This included a lovely walk around Regent's Park, an atmospheric black metal show in Camden, shout out to Sunken and the Black Heart for being so accommodating. We then went to Siren Craft Brew with the amazing Ollie Kenchington, which is a local brewery to us, and lastly we headed to the Snow Centre in Hemel Hempstead to capture CVP's very own Sasha Needham snowboarding. I just want to say a massive thanks to everyone for letting us film with them, but let's take a look at some of the images we managed to capture with the camera. This camera was an absolute joy to use while we had it. It's just very easy to shoot with, as you would expect from a Canon cinema camera. The images we captured were also very easy to get looking really good fast. We shot a mix of frame rates, formats and scenes that we will sprinkle throughout the video. The images we managed to capture look really detailed, but the raw footage in lower light scenarios definitely needs some denoising to get a nice balance between detail and noise, especially at higher ISOs. I expose most of the time using false colour, which you can toggle onto one of the customizable buttons. One nice detail about the false colour is that even with a LUT applied while shooting log, the false colour is showing your log exposure. I'm really excited to shoot more of this camera once they start shipping later this year. Before we get into the nitty gritty of the C400, I just want to mention the price, as honestly, I was quite surprised at it when Canon told us. The C400 is priced at just £6,499.99p excluding VAT, or roughly £7,799 including VAT. And it comes with all of this in the box. That is an aggressive move from Canon considering how they've priced previous cinema EOS cameras. But let's check out what's inside the camera and how it performs. The C400 features a brand new backside illuminated full frame 6K sensor, which has a resolution of 6000 by 3164 and a size when recording of 38.4 by 20.2mm, giving it a pixel pitch of 6.4 microns. It is paired with a Digic DV7 processor, and Canon has rated it to capture up to 16 stops of dynamic range, which is a stop more than Canon rated the C500 Mark II, but less than the C300 Mark III, which featured Canon's fantastic Super 35 DGO sensor. If you're intrigued to see how the C400 stacks up to a few different cameras, well, we'll be comparing it to a few in a bit. When it comes to recording formats, the C400 can shoot cinema raw light and a range of compressed formats. It's a really nice range, which means you can choose from a bunch depending on what your production demands. Cinema raw light can be recorded in 3 different compression variants: HQ, ST and LT. Pixel peeping on our resolution chart, you can see a difference between the 3 variants, with of course HQ having the best quality with the least amount of artifacting. The quality that capturing RAW provides is excellent. The footage is very detailed and very malleable in post. You can change between full frame, Super 35 and Super 16 sensor modes as well. This will change the amount of the sensor being used when in RAW. In full frame HQ, you are limited to 30 frames here, but this can go up to 60 frames if you go down to ST. When shooting in XF-AVC 4K in the full frame sensor mode, you can oversample the 6K sensor up to 60 frames. Cinema RAW light support in Premiere Pro is still quite limited compared to something like B-RAW or R3D, but playback is good on our Mac Studio workstations. It also works really well in Resolve, and you have full control over all of the RAW parameters you would expect to see. The C400 features 3 variants of Canon's XF formats: XF-AVC, XF-AVC-S, and XF-HEVC-S. XF-AVC-S and XF-HEVC-S are actually new for the C400 and are MP4 based, whereas the normal XF-AVC uses the MXF container. XF-AVC-S uses H.264 compression, whereas XF-HEVC-S uses H.265 HEVC compression. H.265 support is really good in post now, so this is good to see, and we've shot a lot with it during our time with the camera. These new formats enhance MP4 recording with the same naming convention, file structure and metadata as regular XF-AVC and Cinema RAW Lite. There are also proxy versions of the compressed formats that you can choose from as well. The C400 features an OLPF, so let's take a look at some charts to see how it handles aliasing. The camera does a good job of not having too much. There is a touch, but not loads by any means. However, when shooting at the lower resolution RAW, you can see clear artifacting, which isn't too surprising. Unsurprisingly, the C400 features a very similar array of colour gamuts and gammas as Canon's previous Cinema EOS cameras, which you can choose from depending on what you need. This means you can shoot in all of Canon's standard log profiles, including C-Log2. You also have a range of in-camera Rec 709 and HDR profiles. I personally really like the wide DR profile when wanting a faster delivery image. Within the profile menu, you can dive deep into each profile and create your own ones as well. This is where you can dial in things like the level of noise reduction or sharpness. The colour this camera captures looks as you would expect from a Canon camera. It's punchy and overall very pleasing straight out of camera. Though when shooting RAW, you can really manipulate how you want your colours and overall image to look quite easily. The C400 is supposedly a big step up for Canon when it comes to low light performance in this type of camera, partly thanks to the sensor being backside illuminated, which should increase the amount of light the sensor can capture, thus improving low light performance. The C400 features 3 base ISOs. These will change depending on what gamma you are in, but if you're shooting in C-Log2, C-Log3 or RAW, these are 800, 3200 and 12800, and then they change between the different 709 modes, which you can see here. This is pretty damn impressive, and it's really helpful to have a base ISO between 800 and 12800. But let's take a look at how the noise looks at these different ISOs. Across the 3 different bases in RAW, they look pretty close to each other. In the menu, you can choose to go between the base ISOs manually or allow the camera to automatically switch when you hit 3200 and 12800. This is a bit of a shame, as I think it could have been a bit better for them to kick into the different bases slightly before them to get cleaner ISOs leading up to it. It would be cool if this was something that was definable in the menu when in auto mode. In manual mode, in base ISO 800, you can go between 100 to 12800. In 3200, you can go between 400 and 51200. And in 12800, you can go from 1600 up to the camera's maximum extended ISO, 102400. Within the profiles, you can tweak the noise reduction for each individual one. With this camera featuring such a high native ISO, low light shooting is something people want to do with it, and noise reduction is a really important thing to explore if you are going to do this. When toggling between the different noise reduction settings in the C-Log2 profile, we can see that when shooting RAW, it looks like no noise reduction is being applied at all, which for those who don't shoot RAW regularly might be a bit jarring to look at first, but it's pretty normal. However, in the compressed modes, we can see the different noise reduction settings taking effect. With the noise reduction set to automatic, we can see a big difference. Yes, we can see a reduction in detail, but that's the balance you need to find with noise reduction, especially when processing RAW. I do like that with this camera you can shoot RAW and a sub-record of another XF format, that way you have a nice raw rush to process in post, as well as a compressed version with noise reduction applied for faster turnaround projects. Compared to the FX6 at its 12800 base, I think they look incredibly similar, which is pretty impressive given the increased resolution of the C400 sensor. Canon hasn't made a low light camera quite like this before, So it's really exciting to see this, and it just adds to the camera's versatility massively. Right, let's talk about the camera's readout speed. For this, we used our in-house measuring tool so we can give you some numbers and compare them to other cameras we've measured before. In its full frame mode, the C400 has a readout speed of roughly 13.27 milliseconds, and in Super 35 it drops to 8.71 milliseconds. This is a pretty good result given the resolution of the sensor. It's not incredibly fast compared to the likes of the Sony FX3 or even Canon's own R3, but it is faster than the Canon C400 and the Sony FX9 and Burano. And while we were filming, we didn't really notice too much wobbliness with it. It all looked really good. For our Latitude tests, we thought we'd compare the C400 to the C300 Mark III, FX6, Burano and Raptor. We used our trusty Zeiss Otis 55mm and used an E to EF metabones for the Sony cameras and a Canon RF to EF on the RF mount cameras. Here's a breakdown of our methodology. And one thing to bear in mind is that the raw clips have no noise reduction applied at all, and the compressed footage has the default of that given camera. So some of these clips will clean up nicely with a bit of work in post, or by setting in-camera noise reduction. Anyway, let's take a look at the results. For overexposure, looking at the C400, we can see that it performs really well up to 4 stops over, where we can see Sam's skin starting to clip a little bit. At 4 2/3 stops over, we can start to see colour shifting on our chart. Compared to the C300, we can see that the 300 performs slightly better, holding onto the chart and Sam's skin for a little bit longer. But given that it features DGO, this isn't too surprising. But the C400 is pretty close. The Burano looks a touch worse than the C300, but still performs better than the C400 and looks great. The FX6 clips a little bit sooner than the C400, and the Raptor clips even sooner than the FX6. Looking at underexposure, the results are quite interesting. The C400 holds colour well as we get into the deeper stops, but at -4, it does get quite noisy. From here, it gets pretty noisy. I then toggled the camera into both the 3200 base and 12800 base at the -4 exposure. Unsurprisingly, both of these clips look much better than the base 800 -4 clip. Compared to the C300 at 800 ISO base, I actually think the C300 looks better, but it does have quite a lot of saturation loss. However, when toggling the higher bases, the C400 beats the C300 out easy. I think the Burano performs better at 800 and 3200, but that third base will help the C400 beat it out in the lower light stops. The FX6 unsurprisingly looks great throughout the 800 base and 12800 base clips, though it does look quite compressed compared to the others. Comparing both clips at 12800 with the C400 set to XF-HEVC, I think they look pretty similar. You can see low noise, but compression and noise artifacts. We'll be uploading the full uncut testing onto our Vimeo, so if you want to scroll through the footage yourself, check out our Vimeo, link to which is down below. The C400 features a slow and fast mode, which will allow you to shoot at lower and higher frame rates than your standard speeds. When it comes to higher frame rates, you can shoot 6K up to 60, 4.3K up to 100, 4K up to 120, and 2K all the way up to 180. All in a mix of Cinema Raw Light and XF formats. In Cinema Raw Light, you will crop in as you lower the resolution, but in XF formats, you can shoot 4K 120 while in the camera's full frame mode. This is a good range, and the footage from it looks really nice. Autofocus also works in this mode up to 60 frames per second, which is decent, and you can shoot with audio in this mode as well if you need to. As well as shooting at higher frame rates, you can also lower your frame rate below your base, all the way down to 1 frame. There is also an interval recording mode for time lapses built in, which could come in handy. The C400 features the same mechanical internal ND system as the previous Cinema EOS cameras. It has a range of 2, 4 and 6 stops, with the option to enable 8 and 10 stops with the extender mode toggled. It also has a clear filter, so your back focus shouldn't shift between clear and the ND being engaged. However, in the extended mode, a warning will come up to let you know that when using 8 to 10 stops, your back focus can shift. So it's something worth checking if you are using manual lenses. This is a pretty solid range, to be honest, and while it isn't quite as versatile as the electronic ND used by Sony in their cameras, it is far simpler. It also has a much faster mechanism for switching between the NDs now compared to the C300 Mark III and 500 Mark II. It's so much quicker, which will make documentary shooters very happy. We wanted to test the colour shift as well as the infrared pollution with the NDs engaged. For our colour shift tests, we lit our grey card evenly in the centre of our frame and then we expose the ND with the lens pretty much wide open, and then close down the lens as we decrease the ND. We did this a stop at a time until we finished with the camera set to clear. When normalising them all on our vector scope in Resolve, we can see that there are very minor shifts throughout the range, but really, they aren't shifting that much at all really, which is good to see. For the IR pollution test, we grabbed an Airy Blonde and a bunch of different black materials for our scene. Starting at clear, we can maybe see a little bit of IR pollution on the left jacket, but it's very well controlled overall. And as we go through the ND range, we can see that this performance stays true, with maybe it getting a little bit better overall with the ND engaged. Our 10-stop test is at 3200 base, so the extra noise may change the colour a touch, but it still looks great. Finally, we have a new Canon Cinema EOS camera that uses their RF mount. It's taken Canon a while to do this again, but it's good to finally see a camera like this with RF mount. The mount on this camera isn't interchangeable, but its short flange and mounting screws around it do make it versatile. These 4 mounting screws are the same as the system that the C70 has as well. Canon already make an EF adapter and are planning on making a new PL adapter for this as well, which will use the mounting screws to fully secure it to the camera, so you can get a similar experience to an integrated robust mount. This new PL mount will also feature iData pass-through, which will be helpful for some workflows. Shorter flanges being the base mount on cameras makes them so much more versatile, as you can mount a bunch of different lenses using the large range of adapters available now for RF. This even includes focal reducers and rear filtration adapters, which could come in very handy. And of course, you can always just use any of the available native RF mount lenses. However, I do think that Canon is still lacking RF mount lens options compared to Sony's E-mount. It's great that Canon has allowed Sigma and Tamron to finally create lenses for RF mount, but we need more full frame options that can be used on this and Canon's other RF mount cameras. Their RF mount glass is good, but they are still very expensive compared to other brand options. But Canon is clearly very committed to create new and exciting lenses more tailored towards video acquisition. Take the 24-105mm f2.8 they released last year, which pairs incredibly well with this camera. Canon's 5.2mm f2.8L dual fisheye lens will also work with the C400, which just adds to the versatility of this camera again. With the announcement of this camera, they also announced a new lens, the 35mm f1.4 L series hybrid prime lens. They sent this to us with the C400 as well, and we've really enjoyed using it. It's very compact and lightweight considering it's an f1.4 lens. People have been asking for a faster L series 35mm for RF for a while now, so this is really good to see. It has an 11 blade iris, features an aperture ring and bindable control ring, and has new VCM and nano USM motors for good autofocus and manual focus performance. It was really nice to use, and it can produce some great imagery. It pairs really nicely with the C400 and the R5C, and I'm sure it's going to be very popular with both photo and video shooters. The C400 features an up-to-date version of Canon's dual pixel autofocus system, and it's definitely a step up from their previous cinema cameras. This new system covers the entire sensor area, which is an awesome change. It also now has animal detection, though this currently is limited to just cats and dogs. Otherwise though, it has your regular subject recognition and tap track modes as previous Canon cameras. The menu for the autofocus has changed a little bit though, compared to previous Cinema EOS cameras. Take for example the speed, which now scales from 1 to 10. The autofocus overall though is very sticky and does a good job of tracking Sam walking in our tests. We also managed to use it in a few lower light scenarios, and it did struggle at points, but given how hard some of these situations were to use, I'm not too surprised. From our limited time testing it, I think it's a step up from previous Canon Cinema EOS cameras, but I was really hoping for a larger leap more akin to the system found in their most up-to-date stills cameras. If you're looking to manual focus though, the camera has plenty of assists such as a magnification tool, peaking, and their excellent focus assist tool. How nice it is to manual focus with RF mount lenses can depend on what lens you are using though. Canon's new 24-105mm f2.8 and 35mm f1.4 behave really well. However, I did find some of their older RF mount lenses harder to manual focus at times. The C400 doesn't have physical image stabilization on the sensor, but it does have a digital IS system which can work together with the optical IS, which is present in a lot of their RF mount lenses. You can't use digital IS when shooting RAW, but you can in all the other modes, and you can see a clear crop as you toggle it on, and then an even larger crop in the high mode. Performance wise, you can see it definitely takes the edge out of movements, and we actually use it quite a lot when shooting XFAVC with our R5C, so it's definitely very helpful for certain shots. I do wish the camera had a stabilised sensor, but I understand that that could have been hard to implement with how much is crammed inside this pretty small body. When paired with a stabilised lens like the 24-105mm, you can get some really good results though with the digital IS. The C400 has a nice robust dual card slot on the left hand side of its body, which houses one CF Express Type B slot and one SD UHS-2 card slot. What you need to use will depend on what format you are recording. Basically, if you are shooting RAW, you will need to use CF Express, whereas if you're shooting any of the other compressed formats, you can record to the SD card or CF Express. It's good to have options for both, but CF Express Type B cards are the better option to go for and aren't super expensive now. Canon have actually put together a list of SD cards and Type B cards that they have approved themselves. Here they are on screen now, but we also wanted to see if some other cards worked as well. And yes, you'll be able to record onto any card that can handle these types of data rates, but it's just not 100% approved by Canon. Personally, I think the next storage cards on Canon's list are a good balance of performance and price. You can also choose what the second card slot does separately to your main one. You can choose from proxy, sub and audio recording alongside your main format. Sub recording allows you to choose from a few different formats, and this means you have the ability to record the new H.265XF format while recording RAW to your main card, which we did a lot when shooting. However, you cannot dual record RAW, which is a feature that Canon's larger Cinema EOS cameras do have. While shooting, I found the CF Express slot a bit too close to the door. It makes getting the card out quite fiddly. The C400 does have anamorphic support, but just as with previous Cinema EOS cameras, it's pretty bare bones. You can toggle in-camera D-squeezes between 1.3, 1.8 and 2 times, so for most, recording the full 17:9 frame will give you the most resolution to play with in post. Canon improving this has been something I've wanted to see for a while, but if you do want to shoot anamorphic with the C400, it's definitely possible, just not ideal like it is with a camera from the likes of Red or Arri. Audio is an incredibly important part of Canon's cameras, as they are used a lot by people running audio directly into them. The C400 features 2 mini XLRs, a headphone out, and a 3.5mm mic input, all on the body. Some may be frustrated that these aren't full-size XLRs, but you can easily get mini XLR to full-size XLR cables for your regular XLR microphones. The camera comes with a mic mount which you can put onto the side of the camera. However, now that the monitor uses a 15mm bar system, you could potentially get a third-party mount as well for different configurations. The audio sounds great from the camera, which honestly isn't too surprising. All of these input options being built into the body will make capturing audio on something like a gimbal or lightweight setup without the top handle really easy, no matter what type of audio you want to capture. Control of the gain of your audio is now on the left-hand side of the body. On the C300 Mark III and 500 II, these controls were on the right-hand side, which frustrated a few users, so this is a really nice change. You can switch between auto and manual gain with the switches beneath them, and if you want to change between line, mic and mic plus phantom power for input 1 and 2, you can do so on the right-hand side of the camera. One nice thing I noticed was that the audio gain bars on the monitor are now colour instead of just white. You can see green, yellow, orange and red at different stages. It's far more obvious now how close to clipping your audio is because of this. On the top of the camera and on the top of the handle, Canon have implemented their multi-function accessory shoe interface, which allows for not only dumb accessories to be mounted onto, but also a range of accessories that can communicate through this mount. This includes Tascam's XLR adapter, Canon's DME1D mic, and their OC-E4A off-camera shoe cord. Recently, DJI released an adapter for their Mic 2 system for Sony cameras with their MI shoes. And I really hope DJI develops one for this Canon hot shoe as well. It'll be awesome to use this DJI system with the C400 without any cables. Right, let's talk about powering this little beast. The camera uses the same BPA batteries that were introduced with the C300 Mark II, and have been used on lots of other Cinema EOS cameras since. There are plenty of third-party options on the market now which have power outputs on them, which can be very helpful if you want to power other on-camera accessories like a monitor or wireless transmitter. With the C400, Canon also introduced new BPAN batteries in 30 and 60 watt-hour variants. These are higher power versions of the BPAs with slightly larger capacities that are designed to enable the full abilities of the C400. The original BPA batteries will work with the C400, but the 12 pin on the front will not work and the hot shoe on the top of the camera will not provide power to accessories when using them. The camera has a power draw of roughly 31 to 32.5 watts, depending on what mode you are in. This means that with an A60N, which is 6,400 mAh, you should get roughly 155 to 160 minutes of runtime. And with an A30N, you should expect roughly half that. Having the option to use these small, affordable batteries with a nice compact camera that can do this much is pretty awesome. And you can easily power the camera with larger batteries via the 4-pin XLR as well. This 4-pin is a really nice choice over the DC ports that are often found on lower end cinema cameras. 4-pin XLR is much more robust, standard and secure. Just above where the batteries go, there is an array of 4 threads which are the same as the 4 found on the C400 Mark II and 300 Mark III. This was for mounting Canon's range of accessories for those cameras, but they couldn't tell me what Canon accessories are going to be using this on this camera yet. However, in the meantime, existing third-party accessories such as V-lock or gold mount plates that use these threads will work with the C400. Take this really nice plate from Full Frame Camera Company, which will allow you to use mini V-locks to power the camera via the 4-pin XLR input with the C400. And with a lot of these plates, you'll be able to use BPA batteries while using these external battery plates, enabling hot swap, which is really awesome. I can see this type of plate being very popular for people who want to use larger, more standard batteries with more power distribution options. The design of this camera was one of the biggest things that surprised us when we first saw it. Canon has clearly tried to design a camera that is highly versatile, and honestly, I think they've done an excellent job. It's a good bit smaller than the C300 Mark III and around 200 grams lighter body only. It's still not super light like an FX6, which is around 600 grams lighter than it, but it's not a heavy camera by any means when using it stripped down. It's kind of like a C200 but a bit boxier. We use the camera on shoulder, handheld, on a tripod and even on an RS4 Pro. I just want to give a huge shout out to Pierce Curry, who works with us at CVP, for joining us at the Snow Centre, lending us a hand very kindly and absolutely sending it down the hill on skis with the RS4 Pro and C400 in hand. The camera balanced perfectly fine on the RS4 Pro with a BPA 30 in the back and the monitor on the top. This was a very spirit of the moment thing. We only had a 50mm f1.2 that would balance on the gimbal. I chucked it on very quickly and it balanced and behaved absolutely fine. So I'm sure with some more finessing and some more kit, you could get a really nice configuration dialed in. If you've ever used the Canon camera, you'll feel right at home here. There are 18 assignable buttons across the camera, 13 on the body, 3 on the grip and 2 on the LCD. You can delve into the menu here and choose from all of these options. The grip for us didn't come set up out of the box, so it's worth sitting down and planning out what you want where when you first get the camera in your hands. It has 2 tally lamps which you can toggle off in the menu, and you can also enable a tally frame for the monitor LCD as well. Right, let's take a little walk around the camera. On the top you have a newly designed top handle which mounts very securely using these 3 different screws. I do wish that it had a record button and some controls like the handle you'd find on an FX6 or FX9. Often while out shooting, I would find myself wanting to hit record on the top of the handle here. The handle does have the accessory shoe pass-through you mentioned before, a couple of threads on the top, and mounting for the included monitor. The monitor included with the camera is a 3.5-inch touchscreen panel that now uses USB-C to connect to the camera. It has locking connections on both the body and monitor, so you don't get any annoying disconnecting. The monitor quality itself is good. It's decently bright but not enough for a really sunny day. It's the same resolution as the larger one found on the C300 and 500 II, but smaller. There are slight ridges around the edge of the monitor, so I'm intrigued to see if anyone makes a hood or loop to use with it. The monitor mounts the camera via a newly designed bracket, NATO rail and 15mm bar system. It's a big improvement over the previous system, but the bracket for positioning the monitor can be a bit clunky, especially with the rigid USB-C cable. The bracket can easily be removed though, so you can reposition it onto the body like we did when using it on the RS4 Pro. The front 50mm block can be removed from the handle as well and mounted onto the camera body itself. On the bottom there isn't much going on, but you do have an updated thread layout which is similar to the one found on the C300 Mark III, but it's missing the middle 3/8 thread. I wish there was a thread in the middle for touch and go plates, but it's something that will be easily fixed with a base plate. On the left you have a bunch of controls and they are all laid out pretty similarly to previous Cinema EOS cameras. The numbered buttons are rebindable in the menu system, but are set up pretty well out of the box. You also have control dials, a nice record button, a button to toggle the backlight for buttons for darker shooting situations, and the same power on button as the C400 Mark III. You have the button to go into the media playback mode, the audio control we mentioned earlier, the door for media, an air intake and a witness mark with a tape hook. On the right, most of the camera is taken up by an exhaust vent and an air intake. You also have the rosette for the new included grip. This new grip now uses USB-C to connect to the camera, which is cool to see. It feels as nice as you would expect from a Canon grip. It has 3 function buttons and a nice record button on the front. The USB-C port for the cable is located on the side of the camera here, and it tucks away nicely. Thanks to it using a rosette and USB-C, you'll be able to extend this out for shoulder or tripod shooting pretty easily, as you could with previous Cinema EOS cameras. You also have 2 audio control switches and an Ethernet port here as well. On the front, you have the lens mount and release button for it. You then have a tag light on the top left, button 12 which is set to a record button by default, and button 13 which is set to AF lock by default. There is also a 12-pin high-res which is standard for powering and connecting to broadcast style servo zooms. It's great to have this built into the body in such a good position. When using lenses that needed this on previous Cinema EOS cameras, this required a long cable as the 12-pin was on the extension unit at the back, not the front, so this is so much better. This is honestly a great addition that required one of the expensive expansion packs with the C400 Mark III and the 500 Mark II to get it, so it's great to see it built into the body. You'll need to make sure that you're using one of Canon's new BPA-N batteries if you want to use it though, as it won't work with their regular BPA batteries. The back has a bunch going on. First off, you have 3 buttons and a little joystick for controlling the camera. You then have the 4 threads we mentioned earlier and the battery slot and release button for it. On the right, you have a large array of the camera's inputs and outputs. The C400 has quite a lot packed into its decently compact body, so let's walk through everything here. You have 2 SDIs, one 3G SDI monitor out and one 12G SDI out, a USB-C which has UVC support, 2 mini XLRs, a 3.5mm mic in, a full-size HDMI, 2 DINs with one for timecode and one for Genlock sync, and a 4-pin XLR DC input. It's a really nice mix that is laid out pretty well as well. Having all of this built into the body of this camera is excellent, especially considering to get a bunch of the functionality this camera has with the 300 Mark III and the 500 II, you would have had to use some of the optional expansion modules. One nice little detail is the port covers. On previous Cinema EOS cameras, these were hard to remove and then over time would become very worn out and hard to get back into place if you removed them. This new system uses a screw to hold some of them in place, which can be removed. That way, if you do want to leave the ports clear, you can do so easily without the risk of damaging the covers. The camera takes just over 3 seconds to boot, which is pretty good. The operating system of the camera is very similar to previous Cinema EOS cameras, so if you've used any of those, this will be very familiar. There's a bunch of options and you have a good range of tools and customization options. You can load in your own LUTs and then output them across the different outputs quite granularly. The C400 has built-in Wi-Fi, Ethernet and USB-C, which means it's pretty versatile connectivity wise. It supports Canon's XC protocol, which means you'll be able to control the camera a bunch of ways remotely. The Ethernet can be used to output lens metadata for virtual production workflows and recorded into the metadata of internally recorded clips. There will also be a few different apps for different functions, which we didn't have time to fully check out, but do look interesting. There's the camera multi-control app, which will allow you to view the image and control multiple cameras wirelessly, and the browser remote app, which is more designed for single camera control. They also announced their new Content Transfer Professional app, which is designed to upload both photo and video using the same app, and this will be good for proxy workflows for faster delivery production needs. Canon isn't planning to discontinue the C400 Mark III or the 500 Mark II. The C400 is just going to be positioned in between them. So I just wanted to talk about what some of the differences between them are. Dynamic range wise, it seems like the C400 Mark III still has the most, which isn't too surprising. The biggest difference between them is their body designs. The C400 and 500 are limited to their larger flange mounts, have dual CF Express Type B slots, can be used with the Canon EVF V50 and V70 viewfinders, have AES and EBU audio support, and RS422 is possible with their different optional rear modules. Otherwise, the C400 has a bunch that these cameras don't, which is pretty crazy. If you want some more detailed advice on what camera may be best for you, get in contact with our experienced team today. I think the C400 will be compared to a bunch of different cameras on the market, but the FX6 is probably going to be the camera it's most compared to. They share so much, and both cameras are fantastic with different pros and cons. We are planning on doing a should you buy video with the C400, so let us know what cameras you would like to see it compared to down in the comments below. The C400 is one of the most versatile cameras I've ever used. It ticks so many boxes for so many different end users. It can produce an excellent image, has great low light performance thanks to the triple base ISO, has solid autofocus, a good range of recording formats and frame rates, solid inputs and outputs, all packed into a really nice designed small body. When Canon showed us this camera, they left the price right until the end, and we genuinely thought it was going to be a lot more expensive than it actually is. Canon has positioned it very aggressively, and honestly, I think they had to make this move. The Sony FX3 and FX6 have snapped up a lot of the market this camera is aimed at, so they had to price it well, and I honestly think they have. One thing to consider though is that the RF mount lenses are still quite pricey compared to their E-mount equivalents. There are also not many third-party lens options as of the release of this video, but hopefully this changes soon with Sigma and Tamron making more. This camera is almost perfect, but there are a few things that I would change or add. I would slightly change the design of the monitor hinge, but this can easily be replaced with a different bit of rigging. I would love to see an optional USB-C EVF solution that could easily be mounted in a few different ways. Maybe they work with Blackmagic and use their new one they've just brought out. Internal 32-bit float audio recording, inbuilt image stabilization on the sensor, and a larger leap in autofocus performance. And of course, I would have loved to have seen a DJI full-frame sensor, but maybe they are saving that for the C500 Mark III. But given how much this camera offers and the price it is, I'm being seriously cheeky here, and this is more of a wish list for Canon's next version of this excellent camera or whatever they have coming next. We've had to get this video done very quickly, so if you have any further questions or tests you want to see, let us know in the comments below. Anyway, if you like the video, please give it a like, and maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss out on our awesome upcoming content. And thank you so much for watching.